Jaren's boots hit the surface of Trellora with a soft thump that might have been impressive if the planet's gravity hadn't been oscillating like a nervous pulse. One second he felt like he was trudging through thick molasses, the next he was bouncing like a popcorn kernel in zero-G. He muttered something about interstellar travel being overrated, though he wasn't sure if anyone or anything could hear him. He glanced at the sky, which shifted colors so fast it made his stomach feel seasick. Violet streaks pulsed into green, then into a peculiar shade of orange that reminded him of burnt cheddar, though that was impossible because the atmosphere here smelled like ionized metal and fried circuits, not dairy. He flexed his fingers, checking the grip on his plasma blade, mostly out of habit, since the first lesson of any alien adventure was that you never really knew when something would try to eat you, or hypnotize you, or apparently try to analyze your snack choices telepathically. That's when he saw her. She stood at the crest of a jagged ridge, her figure backlit by a faint aurora of crackling energy, long ears twitching like twin antennas calibrated for amusement and suspicion at once. She tilted her head, eyes large and glimmering in a way that made him momentarily question if she was scanning him or laughing at him. "HMPH," she said, her voice carrying a melodic lilt that seemed almost too playful for someone assessing a warrior. "Let's see if you are capable." Jaren swallowed. Capable of what? She blinked slowly as if amused by the very idea that he might already understand. "Everything," she said, "and nothing." That made perfect sense to Jaren in the same way that cosmic storms made perfect sense. Chaotic, slightly terrifying, and entirely unpredictable. He stepped forward, trying to look heroic, but a nearby rock, apparently mocking him, levitated at eye level, bounced, and hit him squarely in the forehead. "Ow," he muttered, rubbing the spot where the rock had deposited its, he suspected, alien humor. She laughed, a soft, high trill that made the hairs on his neck stand up. "Interesting reflexes," she said, slow but amusing. He opened his mouth to reply, but the levitating rock took offense at his inaction and zipped past, bouncing off a ridge, ricocheting back toward him. He dove sideways, tripped over a glowing puddle of slime that hissed in protest, and landed flat on his face. The alien girl's ears twitched violently. "Remarkable," she said, not entirely sure if she meant it as a compliment or a cosmic joke. Jaren groaned. "First impression counts, I think," he said from the ground, scraping the slime off his armor. She tilted her head, amused. "You will have many more chances." And indeed, she had arranged a series of chances that were beginning immediately. The first was a floating crystal, drifting lazily above a chasm that smelled faintly of burnt ozone. "Catch it," she said, like it was nothing more than asking him to pick up a pebble. Jaren leaped, arms flailing, calculating physics in real time. He had been trained for extreme combat, zero-G maneuvers, and survival against planets that tried to swallow you whole, but catching a floating crystal that defied gravity in a chaotic ion wind was new. He missed spectacularly, collided with a bouncing chunk of rock, and ended up dangling from a thin vine of what looked like electric ivy. "I think I've invented a new dance move," he muttered, hoping she would laugh with him rather than at him. She did both, the ears twitched, and she nodded slowly. "Adaptation is key," she said. The second trial was less physical but no less absurd. She produced a holographic beast with multiple eyes, wings, and a tendency to mimic his expressions in grotesque exaggeration. "Convince it you are worth respecting," she said casually, as if commanding a child to tie its shoes. Jaren narrowed his eyes. The beast blinked at him and mimicked a yawn, stretching its wings with theatrical boredom. He sighed. "Look, pal, I don't know what's going on here, but I promise I'm terrifying in at least 3 dimensions." He gestured vaguely at himself, half in mock bravado, half in desperate hope. The beast paused, considered him, then sneezed out a plume of sparkling dust. Jaren coughed. The alien girl's ears twitched, an unmistakable sign of suppressed laughter. "Resourceful," she said, and mildly ridiculous. A promising combination. By the time the sun, if one could call it that, because it emitted random bursts of neon pink light, tipped behind the jagged horizon, Jaren was covered in slime, dust, sparks from a misfired plasma drone, and a faint smell of cosmic ozone. He had survived falling, floating, and talking his way out of intimidation by a creature that could imitate his own horrified expressions. The alien girl approached, moving with a grace that seemed effortless. Her long ears flicked like radar sensors, twitching with every minor sound. "You may not understand all of this yet," she said, "but you endure, and that is what I value first." Darren leaned against a rock, catching his breath. "Endurance, huh? Does that come with a manual? Asking for a friend?" She tilted her head, amused by his humor, a flicker of warmth in her eyes, a warning that she was already invested in seeing how far he could go. "Tomorrow," she said, "you will face more." Her voice carried a teasing lilt, a promise wrapped in chaos. "And I will laugh if you fail spectacularly or succeed spectacularly. Either way, entertainment." Jaren chuckled, wiping a smear of slime from his cheek. "Good, I was worried this planet might be boring." She laughed again, a sound that made the strange winds around them seem almost friendly. And in that brief, glowing twilight, Jaren realized that surviving Trellora wasn't just about combat or skill. It was about keeping his sense of humor alive, even when the universe seemed determined to challenge every expectation he had ever had. He didn't know it yet, but he had already started earning her respect, in the only way humans could. Clumsily, courageously, and with a stubborn streak of ridiculousness that somehow made him fit in better than he ever could have imagined. Tomorrow promised more trials, more chaos, and more opportunities to fall flat on his face in spectacular fashion. But for the first time, Jaren felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was part of something bigger, something absurd. Something worth trying to understand, something that might even call him a warrior. And that, he thought as he settled against the ridge for a brief rest, was already a victory. The morning arrived with a peculiar sense of mischief, as if the planet itself had stayed up all night planning practical jokes. Jaren rolled out of the makeshift bed of electrofibers and glowmoss, immediately feeling the tug of Trellora's unpredictable gravity. One second his feet felt glued to the surface, the next he floated, arms flailing like a particularly uncoordinated jellyfish. He muttered something about needing a coffee stronger than a neutron star to survive this, then remembered that coffee here might involve actual ionized plasma and a minor risk of spontaneous combustion. He shook his head and focused on the ridge where the alien girl was waiting, her long ears twitching as she surveyed him with an expression somewhere between curiosity and playful judgment. "Ready for the next set of tests?" she asked, tilting her head so the aurora light danced along her cheekbones. Jaren straightened his armor, which had survived yesterday's slime, drone sparks, and floating rocks remarkably intact. "As ready as one can be before sanity fully escapes," he said, trying to sound confident but fairly certain that sanity had already boarded the first shuttle off-world. She laughed, a soft trill that made the strange ambient winds sound almost melodic, and gestured toward a sprawling maze of crystalline towers that shimmered in shifting colors. "This will test your intellect, dexterity, and your willingness to make a fool of yourself in front of a sentient audience," she said. Jaren squinted at the maze, noting that it wasn't just a maze, it was a living puzzle. Paths twisted and warped, walls shimmered with holographic traps, and gravity inside seemed to bend randomly. "I hope the audience likes slapstick," he muttered under his breath. The alien girl's ears twitched at the corners and she said, "It will, you will provide entertainment." He stepped in. The floor tiles shifted beneath his boots, reacting to his weight, and one particularly cheeky panel shot him a few meters into the air. He flailed, catching a narrow ledge with a scream somewhere between a war cry and a yelp. "Graceful as always," she called from above, clearly not worried about his minor injuries. Jaren pressed on, using a combination of martial instincts, guesswork, and sheer stubbornness to navigate the maze. At one point, he tried to vault over a holographic barrier only to land in what appeared to be a pit filled with shimmering, floating cubes. They jostled him around, tickling him in a way that made him laugh despite himself. "Okay, okay, I surrender, or at least negotiate a truce." The alien girl's laughter echoed off the walls. "Adaptation under duress is impressive," she said, "though your vocal expressions are novel." Jaren muttered something about novel vocal expressions being his specialty and moved on, scrambling through the cubes with arms flailing and occasionally catching a few like mischievous kittens. Then came the next trial, a holographic beast with 6 wings, 12 eyes, and a tendency to imitate his facial expressions in grotesque exaggeration. "Convince it you are a worthy opponent," she instructed, leaning casually against a crystalline spire. Jaren stared at the creature, which blinked and yawned in perfect synchronization with him. He pointed dramatically. "Prepare to meet your doom, vile creature." The beast paused, then sneezed a cloud of sparkling dust, sending him coughing and waving his arms. The alien girl's ears twitched violently and she said, "Resourceful, slightly ridiculous, promising combination." Jaren bowed theatrically. Thank you, I accept all forms of praise, glitter sneezes included." Hours or possibly centuries. Time was difficult to track in a maze where each corner shifted reality, passed with a mixture of bizarre tests, ridiculous improvisation, and moments of unexpected triumph. Jaren discovered that Trellora had a peculiar sense of humor encoded into its challenges. One corridor sent gravity spikes at him while playing a tune that sounded suspiciously like a cosmic kazoo. Another room required him to juggle luminescent orbs while reciting the alphabet backward in Martian dialect. He failed spectacularly, and yet somehow the alien girl's amused presence made each failure feel like a tiny victory. Her long ears twitched with every exaggerated stumble, and he caught her occasionally mimicking his gestures when she thought he wasn't looking. As the sun, or a glowing plasma orb that called itself a sun, descended into the horizon, the final test of the day presented itself. A narrow bridge spanning a chasm that pulsed with electric energy. Wind currents twisted unpredictably, carrying with them the faint scent of ionized metal and burnt ozone. Jaren approached cautiously, testing each step. The alien girl floated above him, watching with a faint, teasing smile. "One misstep and you will become a very entertaining snack for the local fauna," she said. Jaren paused. "Local fauna sounds terrifying or delicious, I'm flexible." She flicked her long ears, a motion that indicated either amusement or incredulity. Halfway across the bridge, a sudden gust nearly sent him flying. He grabbed at a floating shard of crystal, swung around, and ended up upside down, dangling by his boots. "This is fine," he said, voice strained, trying to appear nonchalant. The alien girl's trill of laughter made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Fine is subjective," she said, "but commendable effort." He wriggled, swung, and somehow landed on the other side, collapsing dramatically. "Congratulations," she said, eyes glimmering with satisfaction. "You have survived my tests of intellect, agility, and ridiculous improvisation. Tomorrow the real challenge begins." Jaren wiped sweat and residual spark glow off his face. "Tomorrow, should I start packing my courage and a sense of humor?" The alien girl's ears twitched with unmistakable delight. "Both are required," she said, "and preferably in equal measure, but do not underestimate resourcefulness and the ability to laugh at your own misfortune. Humans are peculiar that way, and it suits you well." He laughed, the sound echoing oddly against the crystalline walls. Despite the trials, the slipping gravity, the mocking holographic beasts, and the fact that he had spent most of the day falling, tripping, or otherwise humiliated by physics, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Exhilaration. Trellora wasn't just a planet of trials and chaos, it was a playground, a puzzle, and oddly enough a place where his stubborn human traits, courage, ingenuity, and ridiculousness, were assets. "Rest now," she said, levitating down to land beside him with effortless grace. Her long ears twitched gently, brushing the air in patterns that suggested amusement and approval. "Tomorrow you will face the trial that determines if you are truly capable, or at least capable enough to make me laugh again." Jaren settled on a patch of glow moss, brushing off dust and spark residue. "I like my odds," he said, "mostly because I plan to trip spectacularly on purpose." She laughed again, a clear, melodic sound that somehow made the alien winds of Trellora feel like a playful companion rather than a threat. As night fell, the bioluminescent plants around them pulsed softly, casting shadows that danced like playful spirits. Jaren closed his eyes, thinking about the day's ridiculousness, the laughter, the spark-filled near-deaths, and the alien girl with her long ears that twitched at every unexpected motion. Somewhere deep inside, he realized that surviving wasn't the goal, earning her respect, and maybe even understanding a little about her world, was. And that, he thought with a grin despite the exhaustion, was worth every slapstick tumble and glitter sneeze along the way. Tomorrow promised more danger, more absurdity, and the faintest possibility of triumph, but for now, Jaren allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had survived. He had laughed. And most importantly, he had earned a flicker of admiration from someone whose standards seemed impossibly high. For a human warrior, it was a small victory. For the alien girl, it was pure entertainment. And for Trelora, it was just another day of chaos, laughter, and the slow, unpredictable forging of an interspecies bond. The dawn on Trelora arrived with the subtle menace of a sky that refused to stay one color for more than a second, streaking from violet to neon green to a shade that looked like it had been borrowed from radioactive cheddar. Jaren stretched, testing his limbs, which ached in all the ways limbs were supposed to ache after surviving 2 days of near-constant humiliation and chaos. His armor was scratched, spark-flecked, and slightly sticky in places where the plasma slime interactions from yesterday had left their mark, but he felt strangely better than he had in years. There was a clarity in exhaustion and a stubborn joy in knowing that no matter how ridiculous or impossible the universe seemed, he could adapt, improvise, and even laugh at himself. The alien girl hovered nearby, her long ears twitching as if scanning his every thought, expression, and minor dent in his armor. "Today," she said, "you face the final test." She didn't say it with threat or malice, only the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly how improbable victory could be and yet wanted to see it happen anyway. Jaren frowned at her seriousness. "Final test, huh? Does it involve glitter sneezes, levitating pancakes, or existential dread?" She tilted her head, ears flicking once with a motion that seemed to convey both amusement and approval. "Some of each," she said. The trial began with a gauntlet that made the previous challenges seem like a child's puzzle. A narrow bridge suspended over a chasm that pulsed with electric storms stretched before him, twisting and elongating as if the bridge itself was aware of his thoughts. Holographic predators flickered in and out of existence, each one mimicking his prior failures in cartoonishly exaggerated forms. Jaren raised his plasma blade, took a deep breath, and reminded himself that falling here might be fatal, but tripping spectacularly was optional. The first predator lunged, a winged creature with 12 eyes that blinked in perfect mockery of his panic. Jaren sidestepped, and then, in a desperate, ridiculous improvisation, swung himself around a floating shard of crystal, narrowly avoiding a spark-laced fall. "Okay," he muttered, "so that's new." The alien girl floated above, observing him with that quiet, assessing gaze, ears twitching as if measuring the subtle shifts in his courage. He pressed on. The bridge wobbled and twisted, gravity spiking and dropping in unpredictable waves. At one point, a holographic dragon materialized, towering over him, breathing a plume of shimmering plasma that smelled faintly of fried circuits. Jaren squinted. "You know, you really should warn a person before you do the whole life-or-death fire-breathing thing," he said. The dragon paused, cocked its head, and sneezed glittery sparks in mock aggression. Jaren ducked, rolled, and scrambled to his feet, grinning despite the danger. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes, time being a fluid suggestion on Trelora, as he navigated traps that required a combination of acrobatics, intuition, and a slightly insane willingness to improvise. He used levitating debris as springboards, manipulated plasma currents with the flat of his blade, and even negotiated briefly with a holographic mimic that tried to convince him it was his own reflection but with better hair. Every step demanded not just skill but the ability to remain calm under absurd pressure, and every laugh, every failed tumble seemed to chip away at the barrier between human and alien. At the far end of the bridge, he encountered the final obstacle. A room that simulated a cosmic storm, winds whipping with the intensity of a miniature supernova, ionized particles crackling in the air, threatening to erase memories, or at least temporarily scramble them. Jaren braced himself, focusing not on the danger but on what he had learned. To adapt, to improvise, to survive while keeping a spark of humor alive. He stepped into the storm, letting the winds buffet him, letting the storm push him around, all the while calculating, adjusting, and occasionally talking to himself in ways that would have seemed insane on Earth. Step left, no, step up, duck, swing, laugh at the improbability of it all. And somehow, against every expectation of physics, probability, and sanity, he reached the center. There the alien girl waited, her ears flicking gently, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You have endured," she said, voice calm, yet carrying the weight of recognition. "Not just the trials, but the chaos, the absurdity, the ridiculousness. You have shown what few humans can, courage intertwined with humor, ingenuity, and persistence." Jaren, breathing heavily, dusted plasma residue from his armor and looked at her. So, I'm officially a warrior or just the galaxy's best circus act? She tilted her head, amusement dancing in her eyes. Both, she said. Both and more. You have earned not only my respect but understanding. You see the world differently than I do, yet you adapt and survive, making the impossible somehow probable. A quiet moment passed, broken only by the soft hum of the storm dissipating and the faint crackle of ionized air settling. Jaren realized that the universe had not been tamed, that Trellora remained chaotic, unpredictable, and dangerous. But he had changed. The warrior he had been, skilled but solitary and rigid, had grown into someone who could face absurdity with resilience and even laughter. Someone capable of bridging worlds not with conquest but with courage and adaptability. The alien girl stepped closer, ears brushing the ambient air in subtle, playful patterns. You are not like other humans, she said softly. Most would crumble under the humor woven into peril or the chaos masked as challenge. You survive with spirit intact. Jaren smiled, the weight of exhaustion mixing with a new, profound satisfaction. And you aren't like anyone I've ever met either. Long ears or not, you make chaos feel strangely like home. She chuckled, a sound that made the air itself feel lighter, and nudged him gently, as if testing the boundaries of trust between species. As they stood together on the platform above the chasm, the sky shifting its colors in serene patterns for the first time in days, Jaren felt a sense of completion. The trials, the laughter, the tumbles, and near disasters, all of it had been necessary. He had endured, adapted, and in doing so had discovered something deeper. Bravery was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward in spite of it with a sense of humor intact. He had learned that respect was earned not just through skill, but through ingenuity, courage, and the willingness to embrace absurdity. The alien girl's eyes sparkled and she tilted her head. You have proven yourself, human warrior. You may rest now, for the trials are done. And tomorrow, perhaps we will explore the galaxy together, or at least see who falls into more puddles of plasma first. Jaren laughed, a deep, genuine sound, feeling lighter than he had in years. I like the sound of that. As long as we can keep the glitter sneezes to a minimum. She trilled with